The twin moons of Orlith hung in the night sky like silver mirrors, broken and shining. Every ship in orbit reflected their glow, human and alien alike, locked in a silent tension that could shatter any moment. The great war between the Terran Alliance and the Virilan Empire had reached its breaking point. Both sides were tired. Both had lost too much. Yet neither wanted to surrender first. Captain Ethan Voss stood at the viewing deck of his ship, the TSV Valor, staring at the battlefield below. The surface of Orlith was covered in glass-like sands that glittered even during storms. His mission was simple on paper: rescue survivors from the Virilan crash zone before the radiation storms hit. In truth, nothing about this mission was simple. The crash site belonged to the enemy, and peace talks had already failed. Still, Ethan believed in duty, and more than that, in mercy. "We don't leave anyone behind," he told his crew as they prepared for descent. Lieutenant Mara, his second-in-command, looked uneasy. "Sir, they're virulents." "The Council didn't authorize—" "I know what they didn't authorize," Ethan interrupted calmly. "But if we don't help, no one will survive down there. That's not what humanity stands for." The landing shuttle trembled as it cut through the thick orange clouds of Orlith. Lightning flashed in the distance, dancing across the dunes like fire. Ethan gripped the console, his heart steady. He'd been through worse. But something in his chest told him this mission would change everything. When the shuttle landed, the air outside shimmered with heat. The team moved carefully, their suits shielding them from the radiation. The wreckage of a Virilan transport lay ahead, half buried in the glass sands. The once sleek metal was torn apart, its alien symbols glowing faintly blue in the dust. Ethan led the way, scanning for life signs. "Anything?" he asked. "2 weak signals," Mara replied, frowning at her scanner. "One's fading fast." Ethan didn't hesitate. He moved through the wreck, pushing aside twisted panels and beams until he found the source of the signal. A Virilan pilot, unconscious but breathing. He motioned for the medic to help, then turned to search for the second signal. It came from deeper inside, beyond a corridor that had nearly collapsed. He crawled through, ignoring the heat and the smoke. At the end of the corridor, he saw her, a young Virilan woman trapped under a fallen structure. Her silver hair shimmered faintly in the dim light, and her skin glowed softly like pale crystal. Her breathing was shallow. When Ethan approached, her eyes fluttered open, a bright, unearthly blue. She looked at him with confusion and fear. "Human?" she whispered, her voice weak but melodic. Why are you here?" "To get you out," Ethan said simply. He didn't think twice. He pulled at the debris, his gloves burning from the heat, his arms shaking from effort. "You shouldn't." She tried to speak again. "I'm not one of yours." "I know," he said with a small smile. "You're still someone." After several exhausting minutes, the last piece of debris came loose. Ethan carefully lifted her into his arms. She felt light, fragile, when as if made of glass herself. As he carried her out of the wreck, she clutched weakly at his arm. Outside, the storm was getting worse. Lightning streaked across the sand and the wind howled through the wreckage. His team was already signaling him to hurry. "Sir, we've got the others," Mara shouted over the comms. "We need to leave now." Ethan looked down at the girl. "You're going to be fine," he said quietly. She opened her eyes again, meeting his gaze. There was something strange about her. Not fear, but curiosity. "You would protect me?" she asked softly. "Always," Ethan answered. He didn't know why he said it. It just felt right. The shuttle took off moments before the storm hit. Lightning cracked behind them, painting the clouds white. As they rose, Ethan checked the girl's vitals, stable but weak. The medic worked quickly, covering her in a thermal blanket and scanning her body for injuries. When the ship finally reached orbit, Ethan sent a message to the command center. "Rescue complete. We've recovered 4 Virulans, 1 priority medical case, requesting immediate clearance for neutral medbay transfer." There was a long silence before command replied. "Captain Voss, you're aware this operation was unauthorized. The Virulans are our enemies." Ethan looked at the unconscious girl. "Not today, they're not." He ended the transmission. Hours later, aboard a neutral medical station orbiting Orlith, the girl finally woke. Ethan was there, sitting by her bedside. He hadn't slept. When she opened her eyes, he smiled faintly. "Welcome back," he said. "You're safe now." She looked around in confusion, the bright lights reflecting off her crystalline eyes. Where am I? Neutral station. Away from the war. You are in bad shape, but you'll recover. The girl studied him for a long moment. You saved me, she said. But why? Your kind hates mine. Ethan leaned back in his chair. Not all of us. I don't hate anyone who needs help. Her expression softened. I am Lyris, she said finally. Daughter of Kailara Varela. Ethan froze. The name was well known. Empress Kailara, ruler of the Viralan Empire. The woman whose fleets had battled humanity for decades. And this girl, the one he had just carried out of the fire, was her heir. He exhaled slowly. You're the princess, he said quietly. Lyris nodded weakly. You shouldn't have saved me. My people would never have done the same. Maybe, Ethan said, but someone has to start. Silence filled the room. Outside, the stars drifted by like silent witnesses. For the first time in months, there was no sound of war. Only the hum of the medical machines and the slow rhythm of two hearts learning they didn't have to be enemies. Over the next few days, Lyris recovered under the care of both human and neutral medics. Ethan visited her often, bringing small things. Data pads with Earth music, stories from old space missions, and even a small Terran flower grown in hydroponics. Each time she seemed surprised that a human would care at all. One night, as the moons of Orlith glowed through the viewing window, Lyris spoke softly. You risked your life for me, Captain. My mother will hear of this. Ethan smiled tiredly. That might not be a good thing. Lyris's lips curved into the faintest smile. No, it might not. But she will know your name. He didn't realize then how much those words would change the course of his life. Days later, as he prepared to leave the station, the war front suddenly went quiet. Broadcasts from both sides carried the same image. A human soldier carrying a wounded alien princess through the storm. The photo, taken by a neutral drone, had gone viral across both empires. For the first time, people saw something other than enemies. They saw hope. Lyris's message soon followed, a public statement broadcast from her recovery room. She spoke calmly, her voice reaching billions. A human saved my life, not because he wanted power, not because he sought reward, but because he saw someone who needed help. If such humanity exists among our enemies, then maybe we have never truly understood them. The galaxy paused to listen. Even the most hardened generals fell silent. And far away on the Terran flagship, Captain Ethan Voss stood before the same screen, feeling the weight of her words. He hadn't planned to become a symbol. He had only done what he thought was right. But in that single act, saving one life, he had unknowingly changed the fate of two civilizations. The stars outside the neutral station seemed quieter after the broadcast. The war had not ended, but it had paused, something that had never happened before. Ships from both sides held their positions. Generals waited. Politicians whispered. Everyone wanted to know, who was the human who had saved the enemy princess? Captain Ethan Voss did not want to be a hero. He just wanted to rest. But every time he walked down a hallway, eyes followed him. Technicians saluted him. Reporters begged for interviews. Commanders argued over how to use his image for peace talks. He hated it. Ethan was a soldier, not a symbol. He avoided cameras, avoided reporters, and kept to the medical wing where Princess Lyris was still recovering. When he entered her room, she was sitting near the viewing window, looking at the twin moons. She was dressed in a soft blue robe, her silver hair braided simply, her alien markings glowing faintly. The machines that had once surrounded her bed were now silent. She looked stronger, calmer. You shouldn't be walking this much, Ethan said gently, setting down a small box in front of her. She turned, a faint smile on her lips. And you shouldn't still be here, Captain. Your people need you, Ethan shrugged. They have plenty of captains. You, however, are my patient until the doctors say otherwise. She tilted her head, curious. Humans are strange. You saved me once. Now you keep saving me from boredom. Ethan smiled a little. It's my specialty. From the box, he pulled out a small metal object, a Terran data crystal. This has music from Earth, he said. I thought you might like to hear it. Lyris blinked in surprise. Music? You bring art in the middle of war? That's what keeps us human, Ethan said. She inserted the crystal into a hollow reader. Soft piano music filled the room. Slow, peaceful, filled with something Lyris had never heard before. Sorrow and hope together. She closed her eyes, listening. It's beautiful, she whispered. It's called Luna Sonata, Ethan said. Written long ago when humans still looked at their own moon and dreamed of other worlds. For a long moment they both sat in silence, listening. The stars seemed closer, the station quieter. Then Lyris turned to him again. Captain, your people fight with such strength. But you also create such gentle things. How can both exist in one species? Ethan thought for a moment. Maybe because we know how much peace costs. We fight hard, but we dream harder. Lyris smiled faintly. That is a powerful answer. Before they could speak more, the door opened. A neutral station officer entered with a message chip. Captain Voss, the Terran Council is requesting your presence immediately. Priority call. Ethan stood, giving Lyris a small nod. I'll be back soon. When he reached the comm room, a hologram of Admiral Rowan, his superior, flickered into view. Captain, do you realize what you've done? The Admiral began sharply. The entire galaxy is talking about you. The Virellans are sending diplomatic envoys. This incident might start peace negotiations. Ethan frowned. Sir, that's good news, isn't it? Rowan sighed. It is. But it's also dangerous. The Empress herself sent a message. She demands an official meeting with her daughter's rescuer, you. Ethan stiffened. The Empress Kaelara? Yes. The Terran Council is considering allowing it under protection. If she wants to talk, it could mean a truce. Ethan looked uneasy. Or it could be a trap. That's why you'll go under full escort, Rowan said. But make no mistake, and you will go. Orders will follow. The holo blinked out. Ethan stood in silence for a long time. Meeting the Empress of the enemy empire was no small thing. He wasn't a diplomat, just a soldier who'd made a choice. When he returned to Lyris's room, she was watching the moons again. You look troubled, she said softly. Your mother sent for me, Ethan said. Lyris's eyes widened. She did? He nodded. The council wants me to go to Virella Prime to meet her. For the first time since he had met her, Lyris looked truly afraid. You don't understand, Captain. My mother is not like me. She is strong, proud, and cold as the stars. She will test you. You must be careful with your words, Ethan smiled faintly. I'll survive. I've dealt with angry admirals before. This is not the same, Lyra said. If she sees weakness, she'll use it. If she sees arrogance, she'll destroy it. But, she paused, if she sees honor, she might listen. Ethan looked at her seriously. Then I'll be honest. That's all I can be. She reached out, placing her hand gently on his wrist, a gesture of trust among her kind. Then perhaps, Captain, you may be the first human my mother truly respects. A week later, the Terran ship TSV Horizon entered Virellon space under White Flag protocol. Hundreds of alien ships surrounded it, silent but armed. Ethan stood at the viewport, watching the green and gold lights of the Virellon capital planet grow larger. It was breathtaking. Massive floating cities, shining rivers of energy, and towering crystal spires that glowed like stars on the surface. Beautiful, isn't it? Said a voice beside him. Lyra stood there, still weak but recovered enough to travel. She had insisted on accompanying him home, but the Empress had demanded her return as well. Ethan nodded. Yeah, it's different from Earth, but still beautiful. The ship landed on a wide platform surrounded by Virellon guards in silver armor. The air shimmered faintly, rich with a strange floral scent. A tall Virellon official stepped forward. Captain Ethan Voss of the Terran Alliance, and he announced formally, the Empress awaits you. Ethan followed, his boots echoing on the polished floor. The palace was vast, its walls lined with glowing veins of crystal that pulsed gently like a living heart. As they entered the throne chamber, Ethan felt the temperature drop slightly. The Empress Kaelara Virella sat on a raised platform, her presence commanding. Her hair was dark silver, her crown shaped like flowing wings. Her eyes, sharp and bright as stars, fixed on Ethan immediately. He bowed slightly, not out of submission, but respect. Rise, human, the Empress said, her voice calm and melodic but carrying authority. You are the one who saved my daughter. Yes, Your Majesty, Ethan said. I did what anyone with a conscience would do. Do you believe all humans would have done the same? She asked, her gaze piercing. Ethan hesitated. No, but I hope someday they would. The Empress studied him quietly, then rose from her throne and stepped closer. You entered a war zone to save an enemy, she said. You could have been killed. You risked everything for someone not your own. Why? Ethan met her gaze. Because she was alive. Because no uniform, no border, and no war should decide who deserves to live. The court murmured softly at his words. Some looked shocked. Others intrigued. The Empress's expression did not change, but her eyes softened slightly. You speak of peace, yet you are a soldier. You carry weapons, yet you protect the helpless. You are a contradiction, Captain. Ethan smiled faintly. Maybe that's what makes us human. For a long time, the Empress said nothing. Then she turned to her daughter. Lyris, she said quietly, you trust this man? With my life, Lyris said firmly. The Empress nodded slowly, then faced Ethan again. Then I will not punish your actions. In fact, I will offer you something unexpected. Ethan blinked. Your Majesty? She raised her hand and a holographic image appeared, a proposal for a ceasefire conference between the Terran Alliance and the Virayan Empire. You will be our messenger, she said. Tell your leaders that the Viralan Empire will meet them, here in my palace, to discuss peace. Ethan was speechless. You want peace? The Empress gave a small knowing smile. I want to see if humanity is as honorable as you. That night, Ethan and Lyris met again in the quiet palace gardens. The air shimmered with floating lights, bioluminescent insects that glowed like fireflies. Lyris looked up at the stars. You changed something today, Captain. I didn't do much, Ethan said softly. Just told the truth. Sometimes truth is the rarest thing, she said, smiling. You showed my mother that mercy is not weakness. That is something even I could never do. Ethan turned to her. What about you? Are you ready for what comes next? Lyris nodded. I will stand beside her during the peace talks. And when your people arrive, I will speak for them too. For you. Ethan smiled, but there was sadness in his eyes. That might make you some enemies. She met his gaze. Then they will learn what I have learned, that enemies can be protectors too. They stood in silence, the soft glow of the alien night surrounding them. The sound of distant water filled the air, calm, peaceful. For the first time since the war began, both the human and the alien looked up at the same stars and saw the same hope. And somewhere deep in her heart, the Empress Kalara watched from her high balcony, her sharp gaze softening as she whispered to herself, Perhaps the humans are not as lost as I thought. She turned away, already thinking of what would come next, for she had another plan, one that would bring Ethan back to her world again. The peace had only just begun. The peace conference between the Terran Alliance and the Viralan Empire became the most watched event in galactic history. For the first time in 100 years, ships from both sides parked in the same orbit without weapons ready to fire. The great halls of the Viralan Palace glowed with golden light as diplomats, soldiers, and ambassadors filled its chambers, and at the center of it all stood Captain Ethan Voss, the human who had saved the enemy princess and started the impossible. He wasn't dressed like a soldier this time. Instead, he wore a simple formal suit, Terran design, black with silver trim. Around him, the air felt heavy with expectation. Cameras floated silently above the crowd, transmitting every glance, every movement across the galaxy. When the Empress Kalara Varela entered, the room fell silent. She moved like a queen carved from light, tall, graceful, and calm, her silver crown shining faintly. Beside her stood Princess Lyris, her daughter, dressed in pale blue ceremonial robes. Her expression was composed, but when her eyes met Ethan's, a small, reassuring smile crossed her lips. Ethan bowed slightly as the Empress took her seat. Captain Voss, she said, her voice echoing across the hall. You have brought humanity's representatives safely to my world. For that I am grateful. It's an honor, Your Majesty, Ethan said respectfully. The Empress nodded, her gaze sharp. You are not a diplomat. You are a soldier who acted with compassion. That is rare. Tell me, do you believe this peace will last? Ethan hesitated. The hall waited for his answer. I believe peace is never easy, he said slowly, but it's worth fighting for. If we stop seeing each other as monsters, maybe we'll stop creating wars. A quiet murmur spread through the crowd. Even the Terran ambassador, an older man named Jonas Reeve, looked impressed by the captain's words. The Empress studied Ethan for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. You speak boldly for someone who stands in my court unarmed. Ethan smiled faintly. I learned that honesty works better than armor. Lyris hid a small laugh behind her hand. The Empress noticed but said nothing. The peace meetings continued for several days. Delegates argued, presented data, discussed borders, and exchanged trade promises. Ethan's job was simple: assist, observe, and ensure the talks stayed calm. But something strange began to happen. Wherever Ethan went, people, both human and Virellan, seemed calmer. His quiet nature and simple kindness had a way of breaking walls. When two ambassadors shouted over territory rights, Ethan suggested a shared colony program. When a Virellan general accused the Terrans of arrogance, Ethan simply replied, "Maybe we both forgot how to listen." It worked. Slowly, people started listening again. Princess Lyris often joined these meetings. She would glance at Ethan during tense moments as if drawing strength from his presence. Together they became a symbol, the human and the alien who had faced the storm together and survived. But not everyone was happy. Whispers spread among the Virellan council. Some nobles saw Ethan as a threat, a human influencing their royal family. One of them, Lord Tharan, a proud Virellan advisor, openly criticized the Empress's decision to welcome him. "He is clever, yes," Tharan said during a private council session. "But cleverness is not loyalty. How can we trust a man whose species once burned our colonies?" The Empress listened quietly. Then she said, "You are right, Tharan. Trust is not given. It must be proven." She turned to her guards. "Summon Captain Voss, I will test his truth." Ethan was brought to a large hall deep within the palace, one filled with ancient relics and holograms of Virellan history. The Empress stood before a glowing map of the galaxy, her robes shimmering faintly in the dim light. "Captain," she began, "you speak of peace. You act with honor. But I must know if your heart is true. Will you serve peace even when it costs you?" Ethan met her eyes. "If peace means doing what's right, yes, I will." "Then you will go where few humans have ever walked," she said. "You will travel to the Virellan border colonies and see how my people live. You will hear their pain and decide for yourself if they are ready to trust your kind." Ethan nodded without hesitation. "When do I leave?" The Empress raised an eyebrow, almost surprised by his answer. "At sunrise. My daughter will accompany you." The next day, a small transport ship lifted off from Virella Prime, heading toward the outer colonies. The journey took several days through glittering star lanes and quiet cosmic clouds. During the trip, Ethan and Lyris often sat together in the ship's observation deck watching the stars drift past. "You don't have to come," Ethan said once. "It's dangerous out there." Lyris smiled softly. "It's my mother's command and my choice. Besides, if I left you alone with my people, they might try to test you too harshly." Ethan chuckled. "Then I'm lucky to have a princess for a guide." She looked at him for a long moment. "You still don't understand what you've done, do you?" He frowned. "I just saved someone. That's all." "No," she said gently. "You changed something inside people's hearts. You showed them that humanity can protect instead of destroy. That frightens some of them, and inspires others." Ethan didn't answer, but her words stayed with him. When they reached the colony world of Rethar, Ethan was shocked by what he saw. The cities were not shining like the capital. They were poor, half-repaired from years of war damage. The people looked tired. The colony governor, an elderly Virellan named Voran, greeted them politely but coldly. "So you are the human," he said. "The one they call the Shield." "I'm just Ethan," he said kindly. Voran didn't smile. "We've heard stories of your bravery, but stories do not rebuild cities or heal scars." Ethan looked around, at the broken towers, the children playing near damaged walls, the exhausted workers repairing machines with limited supplies. "Then let's rebuild," he said simply. And that's exactly what he did. For the next few weeks, Ethan worked alongside the colonists. He helped repair power grids, taught engineers how humans recycled energy, and even helped rebuild a school that had been closed for years. His hands were rough from work, but his heart felt lighter every day. At first, the Virelans watched him suspiciously. But as days passed, they began to help him, quietly at first, then openly. The children followed him everywhere, laughing when he showed them how to use Terran tools. Lyris worked beside him too, teaching local teachers how to share knowledge between species. One evening, as the sun set over the glassy plains, the governor approached Ethan with a thoughtful expression. "You are unlike the others we have met," he said slowly. You do not command. You listen. You do not boast. You act, perhaps. Peace is possible after all. Ethan smiled. Peace begins when people stop waiting for someone else to start it. The governor nodded. You may tell your empress that Rethar will support her treaty. Weeks later, Ethan and Lyris returned to Varela Prime. The empress was waiting for them in her council hall. She watched silently as they entered, noting the dust on their clothes and the tired but proud look in their eyes. You have been to Rethar, she said. What did you find? Hope, Ethan said simply. Your people want peace. They just need someone to believe it's possible. And do you believe it, human? She asked. Ethan met her gaze. Yes, because I saw it. The empress studied him quietly. Then to everyone's surprise, she smiled. Not the small, polite smile of a ruler, but something genuine and warm. Then perhaps I was wrong about humanity, she said softly. Perhaps we have both been wrong. Lyra stepped forward. Mother, the colonies support the talks. Even Governor Varan believes peace is worth pursuing. Kalara looked at her daughter with pride. You have done well, both of you. Then she turned to Ethan. Captain Voss, you came to my world as a soldier. You have become something far greater. You are a bridge between our species. Ethan bowed his head slightly. I only did what anyone should. The Empress's eyes softened. And that is exactly why it matters. That night, as Ethan stood alone on the palace balcony, the twin moons reflected in his eyes. The city below glowed like liquid light. He felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. Lyris joined him quietly. You've changed my people, Ethan, she said softly. He shook his head. No, they changed themselves. I just reminded them who they could be. She smiled. My mother will never admit it out loud, but she respects you deeply now. I can see it in her eyes. Ethan laughed quietly. That's something I never expected. Lyris looked at him with warmth. You've done more than start peace, Captain. You've started trust. Ethan looked out at the stars again. Let's hope it lasts. And somewhere deep in the palace, the Empress Kalara stood by her own window watching the same stars. Her voice, low and thoughtful, echoed in the silence of her chamber. The human shields not only bodies, she said to herself, but hearts. Then, with a quiet smile, she turned to her advisor. Prepare a new order. Tell Captain Voss that his presence will be required again soon. The galaxy will need his shield once more. The halls of Varela Prime were quieter than usual after the peace talks concluded. The Terran delegates had returned to their ships and life seemed to pause for a moment in the Grand Palace. Yet for Captain Ethan Voss there was no rest. The Empress had summoned him once again, her tone carrying the weight of duty and something else. Expectation. Captain Voss, said Empress Kalara, her silver crown catching the soft light of the chamber, the colonies are not the only place where trust must be rebuilt. Your presence is required across our worlds. Ethan tilted his head, curious. You mean other Varellan systems? Yes, Kalara said, her eyes steady. I want you to meet my people, to see their struggles, their hopes, and their fears. Only then will you understand what we need from peace, and what you must shield. Ethan nodded. It was a new mission, unlike anything he had done before. No weapons, no shields, only trust and action. I understand, Your Majesty. I'll do my best. You will not go alone, the Empress added, her gaze softening. Your companion will be my daughter, Princess Lyris. She will guide you. The next morning, Ethan and Lyris boarded a sleek Virilan transport ship. Its silver hull shimmered under the twin moons of Varela Prime. As they lifted off, Ethan glanced at the princess. She was calm, serene, yet he sensed a quiet tension beneath her composed exterior. Are you nervous? He asked. Lyris shook her head. No, but you should know, and not everyone will welcome you. Some may never trust a human. I've faced worse, Ethan said, smiling faintly. Besides, you'll be there. I can handle fear when I have an ally. Lyris smiled back. Good. Then let's begin. Their journey took them to a remote industrial colony on the planet Vareth, known for its harsh climate and difficult living conditions. Here factories hummed constantly, and the workers toiled tirelessly to maintain energy production for the Empire. The colony had survived years of war, but the scars were still visible. Broken structures, worn machinery, and tired faces. As they stepped onto the ground, Ethan felt the heat of the sun and the dust under his boots. The people paused to watch, uncertain at first, then whispered among themselves. He noticed their hesitation. Fear, distrust, or curiosity. It was hard to tell. Ethan walked toward the nearest worker, offering a calm smile. "Hello," he said simply. "I'm here to help." The worker hesitated, but then nodded. "I am Kalen. We don't get many visitors from the capital." Ethan nodded. "Then let's make this visit worth it. What needs fixing first?" And with that, Ethan began his work. He helped repair broken machinery, taught workers techniques to conserve energy, and even assisted in a collapsed bridge that connected two major factory sectors. Lyris worked alongside him, translating for those who could not speak Terran, her presence lending reassurance to the people. For the first few days, the workers watched Ethan closely. Some were skeptical, others were curious, but slowly they began to trust him. He didn't demand respect. He didn't expect loyalty. He simply acted, listened, helped, and protected. Every action he took built bridges that words alone could not form. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the colony, Ethan and Lyris sat near a quiet river. The water reflected the moonlight like liquid silver, and the air smelled faintly of metal and earth. "You're doing more than fixing machines," Lyris said softly. "You're giving them hope." Ethan looked at the shimmering water. "Hope is easy to lose in times of war. I just remind people it's still there." Lyris smiled. "And that's why my mother trusts you. She sees what I see, that you are more than a soldier." Ethan shook his head. "I'm still just a human, Princess. That's all I've ever been." "Then you're the human we needed," she said. "Nothing more, nothing less." The next part of their mission took them to a Virilan agricultural colony on Tira, where famine had been a threat for decades. The fields were dry, and the farmers struggled to irrigate their crops with limited water supplies. Ethan worked alongside the farmers, helping them design canals and water retention systems. He taught them how to rotate crops to increase yield, and showed them small Terran devices that could measure soil health. At first, the farmers were wary. A human in their fields was an odd sight, but soon they began to see the value of his help. A child approached him one day, holding a small device he had repaired. "You fixed it," the child said shyly. Ethan smiled and nodded. "We fixed it together." By the end of the week, Tira's farmers had doubled their irrigation efficiency. Word of the humans' efforts spread quickly through the colony networks, and everywhere he went, Ethan made one promise. He would shield their trust, their dreams, and their lives as he had shielded Princess Lyris. During these journeys, Ethan noticed something subtle. People began to speak openly about their experiences with humans. Fear slowly shifted into curiosity, suspicion into cautious admiration. The princess's presence helped, but it was Ethan's consistent actions, small, genuine, human gestures, that transformed the hearts of those who had never seen hope in years. Lyris observed this quietly, often speaking to her father's advisors via hologram. She reported how the human reminded people that their pain mattered, that someone was willing to stand beside them without judgment. Kalara listened carefully, her expression unreadable, but a quiet respect was forming deep inside her, for both the human and her daughter. Their journey was not without challenges. On one mining colony, they discovered a chemical leak that threatened both the workers and the local ecosystem. Ethan, Lyris, and the workers worked through the night to contain it. His hands were raw from labor, and exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him, yet he continued tirelessly, reminding everyone that even the smallest life mattered. "Captain, take a break," Lyris urged. "You can't do this alone." "I'm fine," he replied, eyes fixed on the leaking pipe. "If I don't act, more will be harmed." I promised to shield them. By sunrise, the leak was contained. The workers cheered, not just for the safety of their colony, but for the example Ethan set, showing them what courage, care, and consistency could achieve. When they returned to Varela Prime, the Empress was waiting. She studied Ethan silently as he walked into her chamber, dust on his boots and sweat on his brow. She noted the tired but satisfied expression on his face. A human who had traveled countless worlds, helping people he had never met, earning trust through action, not words. "You've done more than I imagined," Kalara said quietly. "You have walked among my people, learned their pain, and reminded them that they are not alone. You have shielded not just my daughter, but my entire empire from doubt and despair." Ethan bowed slightly. "I only did what I could." "And yet," the Empress said, her tone firm, "what you did will be remembered for generations. The galaxy will not forget that a human, Once an enemy stood as a shield for the helpless. Lyris smiled, stepping forward. Captain, my mother has never spoken so openly of respect before. You've earned it, not by strength, but by heart. Ethan shook his head, smiling faintly. I don't know if I deserve such words. You do, Kalara said softly. Because you chose mercy when the easier path was war. Because you reminded everyone what it means to protect even an enemy. That night, Ethan stood on the balcony of the Empress's palace. The twin moons of Virella Prime hung over the horizon, reflecting silver light on the city below. He could hear the soft hum of machinery, the distant laughter of children, the quiet conversations of workers, were all lives quietly thriving. Touched by his presence, Lyris joined him, standing silently by his side. She looked out at the glowing city and whispered, You've changed so much more than my colonies. You've changed hearts, mine, the Empress, and countless others. Ethan shook his head. I've only done what any human would do. No, she said softly. You've done what few would have the courage to do. That is why your mother will soon demand more of you. Ethan frowned slightly. Demand more? Lyris nodded, looking at him seriously. She knows you have power beyond weapons and the power to protect, inspire, and unite. Soon she will ask you to shield more than colonies. She will ask you to shield worlds. Ethan exhaled slowly, knowing the challenges ahead. The galaxy was fragile. Trust was rare and peace was not guaranteed. But for the first time, he believed that humans and Virulons could stand together. The stars over Virella Prime sparkled with quiet intensity, as if aware that history itself was about to change. For Captain Ethan Voss, there was no rest. His mission to shield colonies, help citizens, and inspire trust had already made him a legend. Not a soldier's legend, but a human one. Proof that courage, honor, and mercy could transcend war. Yet his greatest test was not over. Inside the grand palace, the Empress Kalara Virella waited, seated on her throne that shimmered like a river of light. The vast hall was quiet, her courtiers and advisors standing silently, watching. At her side was Princess Lyris, calm, yet her eyes were filled with anticipation. When Ethan entered, he felt the weight of history pressing down on him. Years of war, decades of mistrust, and countless lives had led to this moment. The Empress's gaze swept over him, sharp, assessing, and yet warm. Captain Voss, Kalara began, her voice calm but commanding. You have done what many thought impossible. You protected my daughter. You rebuilt trust in the colonies, and you have reminded my people of the value of compassion. For that I am grateful. Ethan bowed slightly. I only did what I believed was right, Your Majesty. Kalara's eyes softened. And yet what you did goes beyond duty. You have become a shield, not only for my daughter, but for an entire empire and for humanity itself. And now I make a request, or perhaps a command. Ethan straightened. He had trained for battle, faced storms, and even war itself, but he sensed that this moment would test him in ways he had never known. You will not return to Earth immediately, Kalara said. Your presence will remain here among my people. You will serve as an ambassador, a protector, and a symbol of unity between our species. You will travel where I send you, shield those who cannot protect themselves, and show the galaxy what humanity truly represents. Ethan's heart pounded. You want me to stay, to be a guardian of your empire? Yes, the Empress said firmly. Not as a soldier, not as a conqueror, but as a human. You have already shown us the greatest power humans can wield, the courage to protect, even those who were once considered enemies. Princess Lyris stepped forward. Captain, this is what I have seen all along. My mother sees it now too. You are not just a man. You are a bridge between two worlds. Ethan looked at them both, overwhelmed. He had never sought glory, recognition, or authority. He had only acted because it was right. And yet the Empress's words felt heavier than any medal he had ever received. I accept, he said finally, his voice calm but steady. I will serve, but only if my actions continue to protect and unite, not to control or dominate. Kalara inclined her head. That is exactly what I expect. Over the following weeks, Ethan's new role began immediately. The Empress dispatched him to distant Virellan colonies where disputes threatened to erupt. On some planets, centuries of suspicion lingered between human traders and local Virulons. Wherever Ethan went, he did not carry weapons. He carried knowledge, compassion, and the courage to act with integrity. In the desert city of Shirel, Ethan mediated between humans and Virellan engineers over water rights. Rather than forcing a decision, he listened. He observed both sides, asking questions and helping them find solutions that worked for all. By the end of the week, not only had the city's water supply stabilized, but trust had grown where none had existed before. In the forest colonies of Alera, he helped villagers protect endangered wildlife from natural disasters. He worked alongside scientists, learning alien technology and combining it with human ingenuity to prevent crop failures. Lyris was always there, observing quietly, guiding conversations and translating when necessary. Everywhere he went, he reminded people of one simple truth, that even a human could choose protection over war, kindness over revenge, and unity over division. Slowly, the Virellan people began to see a new future. A galaxy where trust could be rebuilt, where humans and Virellans could stand together. But not all reactions were positive. Some high-ranking Virellan officers remained skeptical. They whispered in council chambers, questioning Kailara's decision to allow a human to wield influence over their colonies. One such officer, Commander Theron, approached Ethan during a diplomatic mission on a mining planet. "You have your human charm," Theron said coldly, "but charm will not save these worlds. They need strength, not your mercy." Ethan met his gaze calmly. "Strength alone does not build peace. It destroys it. I'm here to protect, not to dominate." Theron frowned but said nothing. Over the coming weeks, he watched Ethan act repeatedly, rescuing injured workers, repairing critical systems, and inspiring cooperation between humans and Virellans alike. Slowly, the officer's skepticism softened, though he never admitted it aloud. Even Kailara noticed the effect. The human's quiet, steadfast presence was shaping her empire in ways she had not imagined. She realized that strength was not measured by weapons or armies, but by courage, trust, and the willingness to shield others without expectation. One evening, on Virella Prime, the Empress summoned Ethan to the royal gardens. The twin moons reflected on the crystal pathways, and soft bioluminescent plants lit the air with gentle color. "Captain Voss," Kailara said quietly, "you have done well, but now I ask more of you. The galaxy remains fragile. There are systems that resist peace, fleets that threaten conflict. I ask you to serve as a permanent envoy, traveling between worlds, teaching, protecting, and inspiring. Will you accept this responsibility?" Ethan looked around at the glowing gardens, the distant stars, and the quiet strength of the Empress's gaze. He thought of Earth, of his people, and of the countless lives he had touched. "I will," he said finally. "I will protect, shield, and serve wherever I am needed. Not for power, not for glory, but for the chance to show that humans can choose mercy, courage, and trust." Kailara smiled. "Then you are no longer merely a captain, Ethan Voss. You are the shield of two worlds, a symbol of unity, courage, and hope." Lyra stepped beside him, her hand brushing lightly against his arm. "And you've done more than shield me," she said softly. "You've shielded the hearts of 1,000 people, teaching them that trust is not weakness. You've reminded them what it means to be alive." Ethan looked at her, and for the first time he realized how far his actions had reached. From saving one princess in a storm to traveling across colonies, to bridging hearts and minds, he had become more than a soldier. He had become a symbol, the proof that humanity could rise above war and fear. Months passed, and the galaxy began to feel the changes. Colonies worked together to rebuild trade networks. Previously hostile territories began tentative alliances, and the stories of the human who had saved a princess spread across star systems. On a small conference ship orbiting a neutral system, Ethan and Lyris watched children from both species play together in a holographic garden. Humans laughed with Virellan children, sharing games and stories. "Do you think it will last?" Lyris asked softly. Ethan smiled. "Peace is never guaranteed, but if people remember that someone chose to protect instead of destroy, it has a chance." Lyris nodded. "And you reminded them. You reminded them all." At that moment, a message arrived from the Empress. She had dispatched a fleet to assist a planet struggling with natural disasters. The order was simple. "Captain Voss, go. Shield them. Protect them." Ethan stood looking at the children laughing together. He knew the galaxy was fragile, that danger and conflict could return at any moment. But he also knew the truth that had guided him all along. Courage, compassion, and honor were stronger than any weapon. "Let's go," he said to Lyris. She smiled and followed him. Together they would travel the stars, shielding the helpless, bridging hearts, and inspiring trust where it was lost. Back on Varela Prime, the Empress watched them depart, her hands folded over her robes. She whispered softly to herself, her eyes reflecting the starlight. He shielded my daughter once, and now he shields the galaxy. Humanity is not our enemy. Perhaps it is our greatest hope, and somewhere, across the glittering expanse of the galaxy, the legend of Captain Ethan Voss began to grow. The human who chose to protect, who chose mercy, and who reminded the universe that the greatest power was the courage to shield life itself. The war had ended, yes, but the real victory was something far greater: trust, unity, and hope, the heart of humanity shining across the stars. Ethan, Lyris, and the Empress knew one thing clearly: this was only the beginning. The shield would never fall.